All right, everybody, I think we're ready to get started with our Plant Lovers Tour for today. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us on this beautiful May day. It is a beautiful May day, nice and cool, not oppressively hot yet. It is just going to be a wonderful tour. Today we've got our research technician, Tim Alderton, over here, who's going to take us around the garden, show us some plants to make your mama smile. The original intention with this was, whatever's flowering right now, because Mother's Day is coming up this Sunday. So, give you some ideas about what are some good flowers to get for your mother. But of course, Tim's very creative and he's taken it in a different direction. We've got plants that are named after powerful women, it seems. So I love it. I am fully on board with that. It's going to be an absolutely wonderful tour. So I am looking forward to it.
The plants, I'm hoping most of you have gotten a plant list, and that'll save you remembering everything, at least the name-wise. But you'll see that all of them have, as Blake says, women's names. So it's Miss Ruby, Miss Gloria's, Lois, Ida May, Diane, Allison, Augusta Dolberg, Wanda, Lola, Ann Chowning, Joanna Reed, and Aphrodite. That's a really strong one there. So, and I'll use those as my basis for choosing some of the plants, whether they're in flower or not right now. Some of them have already passed. Some won't come too much later. Some are flower for a long time. Some are rather ephemeral. So there's a wide variety of plants because of this, but it's going to give me a jumping off point to talk about some, and highlight these groups of plants more or less, I guess. So we're going to head out and we're just going to go right over here for our first plant. And might I add, there's herbaceous stuff and trees and shrubs. I got a little bit of everything in this talk. So whether you have a small space or a big space. So the first one here, as you can see on your list, is Buddleia Miss Ruby. And for obvious reasons, that's an important one here at the Arboretum, since it's the Ruby McSwain Center. And that's part of the reason that Denny Werner, who was our former director, named this one Miss Ruby. This is one of his first introductions, or early introductions of some of the Buddleias that were low fertility, you might say. They do occasionally make a seedling, but so many people worry about Buddleias being weeds. They hear about them in the Pacific Northwest and in England where they are truly weedy, but in most of the common forms. But anyways, this is one that is a dark, what's considered red, as Miss Ruby kind of tells you there. And Miss Ruby was a hybrid that Denny did of Buddleia white ball, which is a complex hybrid in itself, and then Buddleia Davidii attraction, which is a really deep, or used to be the standard of the red Buddleias. So this is just starting to get some color to it. It'll probably be out by the end of the week, especially with the weather we're supposed to have here. But this has been here for several years. And Miss Ruby, in fact, in 2008, got a major award through the RHS, so the Royal Horticultural Society, their plant popularity poll. That's a difficult one to spit out there, the triple Ps, that they did at Wisley, I believe. No, wait, yes, it was Wisley. Out of 97 cultivars, Miss Ruby was the tops. And then the second was Denny's other, at the time, Blue Chip, which was, actually right there's Blue Chip. So anyways, just a little bit of background on that one. So like I said, a lot of people worry about Buddleias being weeds. Nowadays, there's a lot of breeding going towards low fertility or nearly sterile plants. So you don't need to worry about that as much as it used to be. And you can plant it and not expect to have weedlings everywhere. And so you can still bring in the butterflies do like them, the pollinators in general. They are not native, and that's why some people worry, but they do a good job at providing nectar. So despite them being sterile, it's just the genetics of them are so complex now that they've lost a lot of their fertility. So that is my first pick for this one. The next plant is not that far away. Oh, do we have a question, Marilyn? It just depends. Miss Ruby, the question was, do you need to cut the compact butterfly bushes back? And actually, that's another thing I didn't mention. They've shrunk down a lot of the Buddleias. And this is one that's a little bit bigger than some. it depends how much it has grown and how much time you have. I must say whether you need to prune them or not. If you turn around right over here, I have a blue chip, which I didn't get a chance to prune this year, but it won't get much bigger than that. But if I prune it back, it'll have, if I had gotten a chance, and I could still do it, it would have a lot of really nice, vigorous new shoots. It'll be cleaner, it'll be less twiggy. Same here with Miss Ruby here. She did get a good haircut this year, and she has lots of really good new shoots on here. It does rejuvenate them. I wouldn't do it necessarily, say, the first year. You might let them settle in. If it would be another way of doing it before, to see how vigorous it is. If it's really vigorous, yeah, give it a haircut. But if it hasn't grown a lot that first year of being planted, let it go, and then every 2 to 3 years, give them a haircut. So there's a little less maintenance on these than, say, the big standard ones that get 6, 8 feet tall. So any other questions before we jump across the pathway, actually? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna go right over here. The next one is long from being in flower, actually. It won't flower until October. This is Chrysanthemum, Miss Gloria's Thanksgiving Day. So in multiple ways, this one is important for Mother's Day. So mums is what we commonly call them. So this is a mum. And also Miss Gloria, that is Jenks Farmer's mother. And this is a selection that he and his mother made in their garden in in South Carolina in the 70s, actually. And it's a late flowering chrysanthemum. And it typically, for Jenks and his mother anyways, it flowers at Thanksgiving for their, so they have that as a decoration at that time of the year. They're able to have it for reliably. For us, it's a little earlier, but still, there's often flowers right up to Thanksgiving on this selection. It's very vigorous, it's tall. I do give this one a haircut sometimes during the summer, and it's already over 2 feet tall, and we're only, what is it, the 7th of May? So it can get probably 3.5 feet tall very easily. So, but it's what's considered a purple. It's a deep pink to me anyways, chrysanthemum, single daisy type. But just going on chrysanthemums, I mean, and if you want to plant chrysanthemums, this is perfect time. You can buy those for your mother or your wife. And there's a lot of them out there. Some other good ones that we have here in the garden, which will flower in the fall for us. I do have one coming into bud right now, but it's been a screwy year. But Country Girl's another one I really like. It's a single bright pink flower. Gethsemane Moonlight, which we have at the east end of the perennial border, is a soft yellow, and it's another tall growing one, much like Miss Gloria's Thanksgiving Day. And another good one, much more compact and heavy flowering, or Sheffield Pink. It's actually a different species of a chrysanthemum, but some plants that you can think about maybe buying for that a significant other in your life. So the next plant's going to be a little bit further, but let's see, are there any questions before we head to it? Okay, chrysanthemums are so easy to grow in full sun, light shade. Once they're planted, they tend to be a little bit boisterous and go everywhere. So this has gone everywhere in here. We do thin it occasionally. So, okay, we're going to head to our next plant. Most people are here. There's a few more arriving, but behind me is Magnolia Lois. And this one's really sentimental to me, and for a few reasons. My grandmother's name was Lois. So I actually have one of these planted at my parents' house back home in Pennsylvania. My mom really likes that. And I also have another magnolia, Betty, for my other grandmother, my grandma Alderton. So one for both of my grandmothers. And I'm getting a little teary-eyed, actually, thinking about them. But anyways, Lois here, she flowered about a month and a half ago now. She actually flowered earlier this year than she has in years because of global climate change, and we had a mild winter. Lois, you can't see now, but if you don't know Lois, she is a soft yellow and has really beautifully smaller but well-formed flowers that are goblet shaped, and it's just spectacular. to me anyways. The yellow magnolias come from crosses with both our native magnolia, Magnolia acuminata, the cucumber magnolia, crossed with Magnolia denuedata, which is one of the Asian traditional magnolias. It's one of the parents of the saucer magnolia, actually, that you see that gets frozen every year. The thing with this is most of your yellow ones tend to flower later because Magnolia acuminata is a later flowering species. It typically in the wild doesn't flower until it's actually leafed out. And back home, there's Magnolia acuminata behind my parents' house. So I grew up with Magnolia acuminata. Second reason for really liking this plant for me. But the hybrids of these originally came out of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. So they're often labeled as Magnolia brooklyndensis. And what Lois is a back cross of an earlier hybrids of just that acuminata times denuedata and back crossed with Magnolia acuminata. So an earlier hybrid, which is an also feminine name, is Elizabeth and Butterfly. Those were two other ones that were out of the same breeding program. And they were just Magnolia acuminata crossed with denuedata. The color is much better on Lois, and it holds its color. Some of the other ones, the earlier ones, faded to a creamy white, but Lois holds her yellow and when she's in flower, and just a spectacular tree. But and it was actually introduced and named in 1998. Let's see, and it was named by Dr. Lola Koerting. I'm not guaranteeing I'm pronouncing that right, Koerting, who was one of the hybridizers at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. And she named it in honor of Lois Carswell. So there is Lois, but Lois is not the only magnolia that has a feminine name. And there's a whole series, for instance, from the National Arboretum of the girls series. There's Anne, Betty, as I mentioned before, Jane, Judy, Suzanne, Ricky, and I also saw Randy and what was the other one? Pinky, which I don't think of those as feminine, but Randy could be, I guess, but Pink, anyways, just, there's also, you know, they're named after mothers sometimes. And there's another one, it's a grandiflora we have on the other end of the garden, Magnolia grandiflora, which might actually be in flower right now, is Kay Paris, and that's Kevin Paris's mother. So, who is a friend of the Arboretum from the Spartanburg Community College and is a well-known magnolia breeder. So anyways, I just wanted to highlight Lois. That gives us a tree for today to talk about. So any questions while we're here? Oh my goodness. Okay, so the question was, my family lives in Pennsylvania, yes, and this tree will grow that far north, yes. Magnolia acuminata goes the whole way up into southern Canada. It's probably a zone 4 species. Easy. So you cross it with a denuedata, which will grow in zone 5 as well, which is now zone 6 where I'm, instead of zone 5 where I grew up. As it moved up, just like we did in zone-wise, we've been getting milder. But it still can get zapped. My mom's did not flower this year, but she did last year. And I'm hoping next year, since she didn't waste any energy doing major flowering this year, that she'll really grow and become a lot bigger, because she's only been in the ground. Lois has only been in the ground about 4 or 5 years up there, and she's about 8 or so feet tall. But and that's something I didn't mention. Lois gets to about 30 feet tall, so it's a little bigger than some of the magnolias, smaller than straight acuminata, which can get over 100 feet. So it's a very large tree. Much like our native tulip poplars here. So, and actually acuminata is native, I don't know if it's right in this area, but it is native throughout the mountains, down the Appalachians. And I think it actually ventures as far south as maybe even into Cuba. So it has a pretty wide distribution and is quite hardy from Canada to Cuba. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we are gonna head back into the main path and head over to the geophyte border. The oxalis, you like that? It's Oxalis triangularis, M-I-J-K-E. I say Mike, I don't know how you say it, but there's a J in there. Anyways, so that's not my next plant. But right here, because seeing most people are here, is my next plant. So if anybody watched last week's midweek, I actually highlighted this plant there, and I think is my next one? No, not my next one, but one of my next plants coming up also was highlighted kind of last week as well. But this is one that's always in flower for us around Mother's Day, it seems, right here in the garden. And it's a great plant. This is Dichelostemum Ida May. And Ida May is an ephemeral from the western U.S., from California and Oregon. It starts to come up, say, in mid to late winter, and it starts to flower about now for us, and then it goes quickly dormant. This will be done and sleeping for the summer in just a matter of like probably 3 weeks. So it's kind of a California ephemeral. But this is a group of plants that does that. It's related to brodias and tritilettas, which are often blues or white shades. But this is just a cool one here. And Ida May, I found some differing information on where it kind of got its name, but it all goes back to the person who saw it and ended up naming it. So let's see, name for Ida May Burke, daughter, or I also saw niece of the discoverer of what used to be Brodia Ida May, which is Triteletia, Brodia. They've lumped, split. Right now it's Dichelostemum. The species name is said to have been, another thing, been suggested by a stagecoach driver who showed the plant to the collector in that case. So, and then he named it Ida May. But great plant, likes well-drained, full sun to do really well, but it can take partial shade too. It's just a spectacular plant. Great cut flower. The foliage is quite minimal, so you can work it in among some other things. As long as that foliage gets some spring or winter light, you're gonna have flowers on it. And you can plant something around it so it covers it up through the summer where that plant was at. It can grow up through things, through loose shrubs even, and that'll actually hold it. It'll almost twine at times if it's in such a situation. But a cool plant there as far as I'm concerned. Down right over here is one, this one has different names. Some want to lump this into a different species, some want to put it in with that species, or some want to call it a hybrid between this and another species. But this is Dichelostemum pink diamond. So pink diamonds for your mother would be another thing there, connection here. But this is just probably a hybrid between Dichelostemum Ida May and Dichelostemum congestum, which are just two really cool spring or late spring, early summer flowering plants for us here, and make a good combo for the landscape around Mother's Day for us here in the Raleigh area. Any questions about that plant? The question was, is it a spreading plant? This clump has probably been here. Let me see if I don't know if we have accession number on here. 2014, I planted them in here. So, and I probably put 15 or 20 bulbs in here. They don't spread excessively. And probably about the same as what I did over there. So they will spread a little bit, but they're well behaved, and they're really, friendly around with their neighbors. Like I said, they're there during a time of the season that there's often not much else going on. Like right now, you can't tell that I have rain lilies and dahlias much in here, and oxalises and syningia, because they're taking up the space later on. So yeah, it's well behaved. Any other questions? Okay, so seeing none, we're just going to head right down here. So our next plant, based on your list there that I gave you, I'm hoping, if I'm going in the order I set up originally, is Salvia Greggii Diane, which is this fuchsia or purpley pink, I don't know what color, I'm terrible at describing colors, purpley pink salvia here. And this has actually been always one of my favorite of the Salvia Greggii here in the garden since we planted I think I put this here in probably 2007, and it's still persisting in this spot. But the Salvia Greggii are just wonderful plants for us here in the Raleigh area, in the central North Carolina, the southeast, in fact. But this is Diane. I don't think, let's see, was I able to find anything specific about Diane? Nope, I couldn't find anything about why she was named Diane, but it's from the, as Tony Avent said, plant guru Chip shoemaker in Texas, is what he had said on his website. But Salvia greggii in general are just really good bloomers for us. They're called autumn sages. What season are we in right now? I just laugh at that. Where they're native in northern Mexico and southwestern United States, I think they get the late season monsoons, and that's probably what initiates their flowering, is my guess, and hence the autumn sages. We don't have that monsoonal system here, so basically any time that it's above freezing and we are for an extended period and we have reasonable moisture, you know, they tend to flower. They may take a few weeks off during the hottest, driest parts of our summers if we do have a droughty period. But the Salvia greggii and their counterparts, the Salvia microphylla, and the hybrids between them, which are Jamesiensis or something like that, all do excellent for us here. They're shrubby sages. They don't get real big, you know, 1.5 to 3 feet maybe. On most of them. There are a few exceptions in the microphyllas. I have some that get 3 or 4 feet tall, but they're well behaved in our landscapes here. And there's some really spectacular colors, reds and whites. If you get the right ones, there's peaches, which I don't have any actually of those in the garden. These fuchsia colors, and you cross them with Comedrioides is back here, and you get even more purple shades. So just a great group of salvias for us here in the southeast, and give us a wonderfully long season of flowering. And hummingbirds adore them. So who can go wrong with planting them if the hummingbirds like them? Any questions about Diane or their counterparts, the other Salvia greggii and microphyllas? Okay. Seeing none, we are going to head towards the white gardens. The next plant, if you look at your list, is Hydrangea quercifolia Allison. So we've actually passed several Hydrangea quercifolias as we've been walking this morning, but this is one I chose, of course, because of that name, Allison. A nice feminine name there. So this is a selection, actually, Dr. Michael Durr from UGA, well-known woody plantsman and author of multiple books on woody plants, selected from a specimen on the UGA campus. And he named it actually after one of his research assistants, Allison Arnold. So that's where Allison comes from here. I did not look to see why he specifically selected this, but I did read that Allison has a good percentage of both fertile and sterile florets on these inflorescences, and it has actually, I think, good fall foliage was a nice thing about it. Large panicles, though it's not as large as one I have behind here, but in general, Hydrangea quercifolia, just being a Southeast native, are really great for us here in our landscapes. They flower on the previous season's growth, so you do minimal pruning on them. They have, and this is another of those plants, if you watched my midweek last week, also mentioned this as one of my, this species as one of my picks for this month. So they produce a lot of, they're in full flower typically for us in May here in the Raleigh area. So just a really nice one for high shade. They'll take part sun as well, even a little bit of sun if they're irrigated. They're really resilient plants. They can take drought, unlike a lot of your other hydrangeas, which, you know, the macrophyllas, which I often call them dehydrangeas, as they dehydrate when or look pitiful at the slightest hint of drought. These are much more adapted to our climate here in the Southeast, being that they are native to rocky hillsides, actually, from North Carolina south into Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, North Florida, South Carolina. So, you know, they know how to take the heat. But this is just one of the selections. Behind me is another selection. I don't know if you can see the panicles on this one are really big. And that's one called Lynn Lowry. There's two of them back here, and then Alice is in the foreground. She's actually gotten taller than Lynn. But that's another good one. We came past Semis Beauty over here, and there's another one. Was it Silver Lake or something? I can't remember, we came past earlier. Later on, we'll be real close to one of my other favorites, Little Honey, which has chartreuse foliage. All of these make great landscape plants for us here. Easy maintenance. The winter, whenever the foliage is semi-deciduous on these, you can see the exfoliating bark on these, which is a cinnamon color. So it's an all-around really good plant for us here in the Southeast. Any questions about Hydrangea quercifolia, in this case, Allison? So the question is, when should you prune a hydrangea corsifolia? My recommendation, if you want to do anything major, would be right after they flower. You're going to cut off the spent flowers, which they can be quite attractive as well, but you're not going to be cutting off next year's flower set if you do it, say, by the middle to late June, or July, I should say. You're probably safe to be doing your pruning prior to that. But I wouldn't prune heavily other than to shape it a little bit. They're not one that wants to be sheared, and you will lose that older wood in the bark. The exfoliating bark on it if you do too hard of pruning. Any other questions? Okay, so let's see, who's my next one? Oh, we're just gonna go right back outside here. Oh, good, everybody made it very quickly this time. So our next plant here is Salvia farinacea, and in this case, this is Augusta Dolberg. Augusta is from Texas, but the species in general is found, I think, around the Gulf Coast mostly, the Salvia farinaceas. But Augusta was found on a cemetery of all places by, I can never remember his name, Greg Grant, who's a well-known plantsman from Texas. And there's other things in the garden that came from Greg, but he found Augusta on a cemetery plot, and I don't know whose plot do you think it was? It was Augusta. There were actually two, in fact, apparently, on the same plot. There was a blue one, or a purple one, whatever you want to say, and this white one. And so there's Henry and Augusta Dolberg are two selections. I have Henry down in another border, but both are really good perennial Salvia farinaceas. Not all the salvias that you get, say, farinaceas that you get at, say, at the nursery or the garden center, the seed-grown ones, aren't always as good a perennial for us here in this area. But these are excellent ones. It's only been flowering for like probably 2 or 3 weeks already, and this will just go for a couple more weeks, into November. So it's not a good flowering one by any means. What do you think? The insects don't like it. There's only one bee right now. Yes, actually, this is a wonderful pollinator plant. And will flower, like I said, the entire season. You can deadhead if you want, but I don't get around to doing such things, and it still keeps on going. I do get a few seedlings from this, and as long as I've had it in isolation, it's always come true to being white. I've never had a purple one sprout up, but it's just a really good selection that Greg Grant made from a cemetery in Central Texas. And I don't exactly know when, but you can't go wrong with a Salvia farinacea if you have full sun or partial shade. Yep.
Would you find this?
We occasionally sell it here. Tony Avon has sold it at Plant Delights Nursery. I don't know if anybody else is commercially producing it or not. It's super easy, and in fact, I'm pretty sure we've given it away in our giveaway. I can see if Sophia wants to stick some cuttings, because this is a super easy one, a great one for our landscapes here. And I know last year we took cuttings of this, so we might get both Augusta and Henry this year, because my Henry's getting a little bit bigger now, and I can get a few more of him now. So any other questions before we head down the pathway a little bit further? Okay. I get to get up from that crouch position.
Where's it native to?
Oh, southeastern United States. Well, I'm not exactly sure the whole nativity, but Gulf Coast, Texas.
Okay.
Northern Mexico probably, So the next plant here is Phlox wanda. And this is one that Alan Armitage introduced. He was given this plant by a woman named Wanda, who had it pop up in her garden. This has been flowering since at least the end of February. Wanda is a hybrid phlox of unknown parentage. They think it may have, you see this beautiful clump over here, which was flowering a week and a half ago, Phlox pilosa, which has a relatively short flowering season and then goes summer dormant and looks crappy, which I do need to give it a haircut to spruce that up, but I haven't gotten there quite yet. And they're not sure who the other parent might be, but that's just one of the guesses. Phlox wanda, on the other hand, will flower basically anytime it's above freezing. They've said you could probably even grow it on your windowsill in the house through the winter months and have it flower. It's really difficult to root. It will root just about from any piece of material you stick of it. And this is about as big as it gets. It gets, say, 12 to 20 inches tall, maybe 24 if you're really lucky. And Wanda just makes a show. For me, Wanda also has some sentimental value because one of my mom's co-workers when she was working and family friend name was Wanda, and she passed away in 2000. I gave one of these to my mom as well, and this is growing back home in Pennsylvania, so it is at least zone 5B, 6A hardy, and it's getting some promotion in the southeast here as a really good phlox. Right now, the foliage doesn't look too bad on it. There's some spent flower stalks I need to take out of here, but not much going wrong with this thing. The foliage is just always green. I mean, it's always clean, never gets powdery mildew like its counterparts back here, the tall phlox, the Phlox paniculata type. So just a really nice garden plant. So you can use it in containers, you can use it in the ground. It does want a fair amount of sun. In the partial shade, it may flop. So I have it here in the front of the border. It used to be in another part of the garden down there before we put the new pathway into the rose garden, and I ended up moving her because she was kind of hidden back there. And I put her here, and she has done wonderfully for the last year now, so, and is really taking off. So any questions about Wanda? The question from Marilyn was, is this a fussy plant about moisture? No. I mean, I don't have automated irrigation in this border, and I occasionally do get a sprinkler out if we have really dry conditions, but Wanda is wonderfully fine with that. And being she's our native, and Pilosa is an excellent native for us, very drought tolerant once established, Wanda is as well.
And where can we find it?
I'm not sure right offhand. I mean, I think we may have either sold it or gave it away last fall, to tell you the truth. We may take some more cuttings again this summer if we can sacrifice a few flower stalks, because it never stops flowering. So, and I don't know if any nurseries are carrying it yet, but it is one that should be out there. And I know the extension from Tennessee wrote up a really nice article about Wanda. They've been promoting it in Tennessee, so I'm sure it should be available. But I haven't looked.
What are these purple?
Okay, not a plant that I was going to talk about today, but the question was, what are these purple ones over here? This is one of the alliums. I don't remember which one it is. I just planted this one in here. So this is one of your ornamental onions. Those were some bulbs I planted in January that I got from Brent and Becky. I'd have to look at the records to see which one that is. I haven't memorized them all yet. So I do know a lot of this border, but I don't remember which allium that is, because there's another allium down there. There's Christophii here, then there's two more alliums I planted right down there. There's another allium over there. So I can't remember who's who. So anyways, but these are looking great right now, coming up among our Echinacea pallida right here. So, and that was kind of what I was hoping for. Any other questions before we, let's see, who are we going to next? Oh, we're going to go down the border here a little bit further. So any questions? Okay, seeing that, we're going to make just a short walk down this direction. Okay. Most everybody's here now, it looks like. So the next one's not quite in flower yet, but this is a little boisterous plant here. It will be in flower shortly, but there's lots of its relatives in flower in the garden right now. And that's kind of what I wanted to highlight again. Excuse me. This is Nymphophila, Uvaria Lola. Lola is, well, let's see. It's one that the nursery, North Carolina nurseryman or plantsman Jim Massey got a hold of from a woman who had it in her garden, and you can guess what that woman's name was. Lola. I don't know what Lola's last name was, but Lola is, when she's in flower, is 5, even 6 feet tall. She's a little bit later than some of our other Nymphophias, which if you go through the garden right now, there's actually quite a few, especially over that direction, in flower right now. And some of them flower off and on all summer. The newer ones often are very compact, but this is one of the boisterous older cultivars. It only flowers once. It does a big hurrah and it's finished. But Lola is probably one of the largest ones we grow around here. The Nymphophias in general give us the opportunity, and it was something I didn't think about how until I was reading yesterday. we can't grow aloe, very many aloes, I should say, outside here in the eastern United States like they can in the Mediterranean climates like California, and for instance, where they grow a lot of aloes. But these kind of give you that same appearance on the flowers of aloes, and they are closely related, in fact, actually. So anyways, this is going to have tall spikes of bright orange flower spikes or stalks, probably in the next month or so. I'm not seeing any pushing up yet, but they tend to be fairly quick on when they do start to push. Lola has been in this border for way longer than I've been working here. So she's long-lived, and she is a big, bold element in this border when she comes into flower. But like I said, I just wanted to highlight Kniphofeas in general, and Lola was the one to do for her name. So any questions about Kniphofeas?
Well, this looks like it's in the shade.
This is full blazing sun. The only shade you're getting here right now is because there's a little bit of the crepe myrtle here, and we're early in the morning. So yeah, Kniphofeas prefer full blazing sun. Some of them will hold on in partial shade, but they're gonna do their best in full blazing sun. And we have some that actually, some of the species tend to actually self-sow for us. So there's a big patch outside the the rose garden over here right now that I didn't plant most of them. They've been self-sowing about. There's some different shades, and they are actually some good sized ones as well. I think it might be Kniphofea tuchii, but I don't remember offhand anymore. But we have some other hybrid ones in the color trials. We get them in the perennial trials. There's actually one right here. It's a soft yellow one, if I remember right. There's some others in the border as well, but they like sun. They're from grasslands in southern Africa. Is most of their habitat. So. Any other questions about Kniphofea? Okay, I have to see where we're going now. Okay, we're just gonna go right down here to this iris. So hiding in among the silphium foliage here is also an iris. And this is actually a really cool Louisiana type iris. This is Iris Ann Chowning. And it's named after, who do you guess? Ann Chowning, her husband, I think, was the one who named it, if I remember correctly, because his name was Frank, who named it, Frank Chowning. And he registered it in 1976. And it's a hybrid between Miss Arkansas and W.B. McMillan. I don't know who that is, but Miss Arkansas, there's another, maybe mother at that point, you know. But anyway, so Ann is just, it's a color you don't often see in a lot of our irises, at least in our bearded irises. It's kind of this bronzy red shade, and different lighting, it looks different. This looks more orange to me right now. Later on, it'll pick up some tones that are more rosy in the day, but it's a good bloomer. It does well. A lot of Louisianas, you can grow them submerged, or immersed, I should say, in the edge of a pond, or you can grow them in your border. In the summer, the foliage, if you grow it in the border in particular, the foliage will die down for the most part, and you can have other things around it that kind of fill in. So in here in the summer, I'll have some Acalypha pendula, I believe. My chenille plant will take over, and this silphium, and there's some gladiolus that have gotten, crocosmia, I should say, that have gotten in here, and they'll fill in some of the voids here. So, and if the rabbits would stop eating, I have a persicaria here that they would, it would fill this void in too. But anyways, Ann is kind of a very, like I said, it's a really good iris. It's one of only, actually, the only one that at least they were saying on the iris website where you do the registering of them, that has ever received 2 medals. This Mary Swords Debillon a medal, and it's got it twice. So. And that was mentioned over multiple websites when I was looking up information about Ann this morning. So, or actually last night. So it's just a really good iris. We don't grow as many of the Louisiana type irises. There are a handful. There's some lavender colored ones or purple colored ones down here, and white colored ones. Some of them only get a foot tall. Some of them get 3, even 4 feet tall. There's a wide variety of them. We think of the bearded irises much more in our landscapes, but these are some underused ones. If you walk the garden, you're going to see some of them. In our rain garden over near the rose garden right now, there's a bunch of both Louisiana type irises as well as some of our other native irises that are doing their thing right now. So they're perfectly adapted for our summers here, and as long as you give them a decent amount of sun, and I mean, they're quite drought tolerant. Like I said, they'll just go dormant if in the summer if they don't have adequate water, but you can cut them back and they kind of just filter into the adjoining beds without even having to notice. So they do well, and you can guess they can take a little bit of heat and humidity too. So it's like being that they're Louisiana irises or inundation. So it's just an iris group that we are underused, and I thought I'd highlight that with Anne here today. Any questions about the Louisianas, and especially Anne Chowning? Okay. Who do I have now? Oh, my next one is, you can choose which side you look at. It's on both sides, actually, down here. So in front of me down here is our next one. It's Nepeta Joanne Reed. And I think, actually, Doug Ruin is the one who brought this one into the garden. And I think he knows, or knew, I should say, Joanna Reed. She's from southeastern Pennsylvania, Longview Farms. Apparently, she's a well-known plants woman there. I did not. I'm from western Pennsylvania. I didn't know her. But anyways, this is a seedling that popped up in her garden, and it's believed to be a hybrid between Nepeta siberica, which is a little bit more upright, and then Nepeta fascenii, which are most of what we see growing today in our landscapes. And there's actually another one right down here. Six Hills Giant, for instance. But anyways, Joanna Reed. And for me, Joanne is spelled wrong, but my mom's name is Joanne. So that's another one that has a little connection for me. And I do like it for that reason. And I think I took one of these up to her a couple years ago. And it's growing in Pennsylvania as well. But Nepetas are great for us here, especially in spring and early summer. They'll go into the summer as well and flower, but the heaviest flowering is often around Mother's Day or a little earlier on these. So, but Joanna here is doing her thing. She's in full flower, and she'll flower off and on most of the entire summer. Like I said, I've been forgetting to mention some of the plants, that are relatively deer and rabbit resistant or proof. And this is one of them, the Nepetas. Nothing seems to bother them. The only way you might kill them would be to overwater them. So they're drought tolerant and deer and rabbit proof, more or less. It has a nice fragrance. They're cat mints. Cats may like to roll in them a little bit. They're not as much as catnip, which is a different species of Nepeta, which is the one that really gets them drunk. But a lot of our Nepetas they're great to filter, put along the edge of the beds, because they tend to be, under 2 feet tall for the most part. So often 1 foot to 2 feet, depending, or even 6 inches to 2 feet. But so they're great front of the border, and I like the fragrance. To me, it has some clove and cinnamon in it. You have to do scratch and sniff. I often see people here in the garden, I say, you need to smell this, and I can't get them to actually pull their hands through it. I say, no, not just the flowers. It's not the flower. It's the foliage. So it's one of those plants you want to stop and embrace a little bit. In general, the Nepetas are just great for us here for full sun, a little bit of shade. They're not highly tolerant of shade is the only thing, but they have a lot of other attributes that we can use in our gardens. Marilyn?
What do they look like in the winter, and do you cut them back?
Okay, so Marilyn asked what they look like in the winter. They do die back pretty much to a crown, and it's easy enough. You can give them a haircut. You will see the new growth even in the fall and winter. It's all congested right at the base, and then when it starts to get warm, they explode out and grow in the spring. So, I mean, there's probably multiple crowns in here at this point that you'd see, but they'll die back to just a much smaller space, but they'll expand out from that. They go about 1 foot out from the crowns typically. So there's probably 2 or 3 good-sized crowns in here anymore on that. So And that's pretty much in general with most of your Nepeta that we're growing around here. Do I have time to deadhead? Not many things. So the question is, do you deadhead? No, I don't. You theoretically could shear these and you'd get a fresh growth. You don't have to. It'll keep on going to some extent, but if it starts to really look on the bad side, you could give it a haircut and it will quickly reflush. But most of the times it's not required. Any other questions before we go to our last plant, which is a backtrack and a jaunt? Seeing none, we were gonna go over here. I know, it already got flowers on that aster. Isn't that crazy? This is a group of plants that are actually somewhat significant for NC State in particular because, let's see, in the 90s, Richard Hartledge and JC did some crosses, early crosses with Calycanthus. And the first one was Calycanthus Hartledge wine. And that was a cross between Calycanthus floridus and Calycanthus, or at that point it was being called Calycanthus sinensis. And for the time it was considered an an intrageneric hybrid. But then they realized, the Chinese just like to put Sino on things, so it was not Calycanthus. But anyways, it just became an interspecific hybrid. This is one that Tom Rainey created, which is a little bit of an improvement over Hartledge wine. This is Calycanthus Aphrodite. Calycanthus Aphrodite incorporates not our eastern native Calycanthus, but the western Calycanthus, Calycanthus occidentalis, with the Chinese species Calycanthus sinensis, which is actually in flower in at least one spot. I have 2 plants in the garden. I need to propagate that one too. But it's a beautiful white flower with a yellow center or cup in the center, some hints of yellow. It's really pretty. But anyways, what Hartledge wine was lacking was fragrance. This has some light fragrance to it, unlike Hartledge wine. It's a bit freer flowering, very vigorous. This has been in the ground like 3 or 4 years at most. But this is Aphrodite, and there's some other creations that Tom has done, Tom Rainey. He has Venus, which has been around, we've had it almost as long as I've been here at the Arboretum, and it's a white flowered one. The only problem I have with that one is because it's a white flowered one, you get some rainy weather like we have and it's humid, it does get spots that are noticeable on the flowers. I'm seeing a little bit on some of the older flowers here, but there's a lot that are pristine. On this, it's harder to, you don't get it as bad on the pink flowered ones, but this is just a really good, vigorous plant. Tony Avent has been testing this species for way longer because when I was working at Plant Delights 18 or 19 years ago, he already had it in his garden, but it wasn't introduced until a bit later, I think until 2013. But Tony's plant has now gotten like 25 feet wide. And like 12 or 15 feet tall. So it's vigorous, but it does take pruning if you don't need it to get quite so large. You can prune it back after it has finished flowering in the spring and get a new flush of growth, and it may actually reflower a little bit after doing such things to it. But this is a really cool hybrid Calycanthus with NC State origins and Aphrodite being a really strong feminine name there. You know, from the, is that Greek or is that Roman mythology? I can't remember which. Anyways, so a good one here to try in your landscape if you have space. And I don't think deer bother Calycanthus too much. So, and the rabbit, it just outgrows the rabbits. So, any questions? Okay, the question is how long will it flower? I mean, this does a mass flowering now for probably about a month. And then you'll get some scattered flowering throughout the summer months into the fall. Though it's not going to be as heavy as this. Marilyn was asking whether it gets good fall color. Nothing gets good fall color to me here. I hate to say it. I'm really prejudiced, I know. And I don't know. To tell you the truth, I don't pay attention. Typically, we get fall color here when I go home for Thanksgiving. And so I miss the 4 days of fall color that we have in this area. So I haven't noticed, to tell you the truth, if it gets good fall color. Any other questions before we end it? Okay, hearing none. Thank you all for coming today and hearing my list of, let's see, what was the title? It's something about
Plants to make your mama smile.
Plants to make your mama smile, yeah.
Oh, plants